University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and it's time for another episode chock full of helpful admissions information. It's great to be back with you if you're on your commute or you're working out or pipetting in the lab or walking across campus, wherever you're listening. If you're new to this show, I want to say welcome. And if you're a returning listener, hey, welcome back. Thank you, as always, for sharing your time with me and telling others about this podcast. Hey, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button on whichever platform you're using to listen to this so that you can always be up to date as I roll out these episodes, and I have more coming your way. I'll tell you about that in a minute. You'll find in some of the show notes today registration links for some upcoming fairs, including the AAMC's virtual fair on February 22nd. A bunch of schools will be participating, and it's free. Also, since I'm featuring another med school in Chicago today, it's worth pointing out that you can come and meet some of these med schools from Chicago, among others, including yours truly from Case Western, at the AAMC Student Recruitment Fair taking place in downtown Chicago on March 28th. Again, the registration site can be found in the show notes. Oh man, have I got a great episode for you today with Dr. Layla Amiri, who is the Assistant Dean for Admissions and one of my close admissions friends. Of course, we're going to talk all things UIC comm, in which she gives some really helpful tips along the way. But we take some time at the end of our conversation to answer listener questions about letters of recommendation. It's kind of that time of year when prospective applicants should be thinking about who they might want to approach about a letter of rec. So I've pulled together some listener questions about this that Dr. Amiri and I discuss. Speaking of questions, if you have a question for me or a future guest, then send it to me at allaccess@case.edu. Also, if you have a suggestion for a school that you'd like to hear me try and feature on the show, then send me your wish list. I have to tell you that I have already recorded some conversations with both the admissions deans from Baylor College of Medicine and the admissions dean from the Uniformed Services University. And those are both schools that are based on listener recommendations. So they're really helpful to me for you to send me your wish list. Those episodes will be coming out in the next few weeks. I'm working on cleaning them up. Also, I am having a conversation with the Dean of Admissions from the medical school at the University of Toronto in a couple weeks. So, did you know that they accept applications from U.S. citizens? I didn't. So that should make for a very informative and educational episode. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Oh, one more thing. I have a special episode in the works with a couple of my medical school financial aid friends from The Ohio State University and the University of Pennsylvania, where we're going to be talking about how to pay for medical school, scholarships, loans, all kinds of other stuff about financial aid. So we're kicking off 2020 with a big bang. All right, let me tell you a little bit about my guest today, Dr. Layla Amiri. Dr. Amiri joined the UIC College of Medicine team in 2017 as an assistant dean for admissions and recruitment. She oversees admissions and recruitment for all three campuses of the College of Medicine. She's a passionate advocate for holistic review and admissions and a strong supporter for students in helping them achieve their academic and professional goals. Dr. Amiri has spent her entire career in higher ed, starting as a peer advisor in the biology department. Over her career, she's worked with a variety of students at 7 different institutions. Over this student-centered career, she has been an advisor, faculty member, and a mentor. I can tell you that she's been working in med school admissions for a long time. In the medical education arena, she has engaged in leadership at the national level, serving as the liaison for the Committee on Admissions, which is a big deal. It's through the AAMC. And she's also been an AAMC holistic review facilitator, working with other medical schools' admissions committees on how to include holistic review in their processes. Dr. Amiri's research interests focus on the process of student learning with an emphasis in medical education at transitional times in a student's academic journey. Now, here's a little bit of background on UIC College of Medicine. The University of Illinois College of Medicine, or UIC, is one of 4 regional campuses in the UIC College of Medicine system. There's Chicago, Urbana-Champaign, Rockford, and Peoria. UIC is located in the upper Midwest United States in Chicago, Illinois, and has been in existence since 1881. Their mission is to educate exemplary physicians and physician scientists to serve the diverse populations and medical needs of the people of Illinois, the nation, and the global community. They achieve this mission through an innovative and evolving curriculum that integrates the basic, clinical, and social sciences, and through a learning environment that emphasizes self-directed, individualized, and experiential learning. Impressively, the college is second in the nation, aside from historically Black medical schools, in graduating physicians from racial, ethnic groups underrepresented in medicine. And interestingly, the Peoria and Rockford campuses are among the highest producers of rural physicians in the country. The largest campus of the UIC system is located in Chicago, in the heart of the Illinois Medical District, which is just 2 miles west of downtown Chicago. UIC is a public institution in an urban setting that accepts applicants from Canada, international, and states outside of Illinois. In 2019, UIC received a little over 6,000 applications and interviewed 840 applicants for a class size of 310. 50% of that incoming class of 2019 were women, and 21% self-identified as underrepresented in medicine. All right. Are you ready? Here we go. Layla, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you on.
It's my pleasure. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
I mean, you really are one of my longtime friends in this admissions stuff. And it is just an extra special treat for me. And I'm just so grateful for your time. I know you're busy today. And I, most importantly, I think the listeners are going to really enjoy hearing from you because you, as I just read your bio sketch, you've been doing this for a while. So I think you have a lot of really helpful and sage advice to share with people. So I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, well, hey, before we get into everything UIC, I want them to know a little bit more about you beyond what I read your bio sketch to them. So tell us, like, clearly you have a passion for working with students. You have a passion for admissions. So what do you enjoy most about what you get to do every day?
Oh my gosh, the list is so long. And I'm not saying that just to say it. I mean, I came into admissions by accident, for lack of a better word. It was really, as you mentioned, my love for working with students. The thing that makes me really excited from all of the different things that I get to do is I love interview days because, all of the work for us goes in for screening and inviting students to campus. So when they join us here on campus and they set foot, as far as we're concerned, they are admissible. And the opportunity to meet the candidates in person is really exciting. It's thrilling to meet them. Usually and most often they are so much better in person than they could have possibly even tried to share with us in paper.
That's true.
And so that's thrilling. I mean, I love interview day. I love interacting with the students. So that's part one. And then the continuation of that is when they matriculate. Right. So then it's revisiting. Remember interview day? We had just met you. I was so nervous, this, that, and the other. And then they're here and it's a good fit. 6 months down the road, I see them and they're really excited to be walking around here and being our students. So sorry, it's not one thing. It's just this continuum of walking with our students as they go through this journey.
So you're not a native Chicagoan, right?
No.
Yeah. So Chicago's been your new hometown. I love Chicago. We were just there with my family over the holidays, actually, and we did some damage down Michigan Avenue.
In our 60-degree winter?
Yeah, it was. Well, we lucked out. We lucked out for sure. We were on those days. And then we went to the art museum, which is absolutely world class. What do you like to do in Chicago? What are some of your favorite things? And what are some hidden gems that maybe just Chicagoans go and check out that you would tell people about?
Yeah, so I should have done my homework on the native Chicagoans piece. As you mentioned, I'm relatively new to Chicago. I moved here in 2014. Mm-hmm. So the Art Institute exactly is where I spend a lot of my time. I mean, if it's not every other weekend, it's at least once a month.
Oh, wow.
And I just cannot get enough of what's going on in the Art Institute. We have 11 museums here, so I do spend a lot of time in the different museums, going in and out. Annual pass holder to most of them. So yes, that's where my salary goes.
You get to jump the lines though.
Yeah. And I really like live theater, and there's so many opportunities. I mean, beyond the big production companies that we have, there's all these little ones that, we can get half price tickets for, and just go in on a Saturday night or a Sunday night or even on a weeknight and just see these incredible live performances. Just 2 nights ago, they had a performance in one of the mansions here in town. It was a quartet, a string quartet of faculty from Indiana, and they were here to celebrate Beethoven's 250th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
And it was great. It was just an hour and a half of magic, and no lights. There was just flameless candles, and just blown away by the music. It's wonderful. And then biking, I mean, that's kind of what folks do around here. Yeah. There's a lot of paths. I was used to hiking and walking around a lot coming from Florida. There's not much hiking to be done here, but definitely lots of bike trails.
What do you find? You interact with a lot of different kinds of people and have over the course of your career. What do you find something people are surprised to learn about you?
So this is a new addition to the things that I do. So a couple of years ago, I became involved with Krav Maga. And so for those that know me are surprised that that's what I do, because everyone knew me as, the Zumba person and, just regular CrossFit and, hit workouts. And so, the past 2 years I've been involved with Krav Maga, and I'm proud to say in November I passed my level 2 test and I did not die after 4 hours and 15 minutes of intense physical activity. So I'm working on, testing out of level 3 now, which will be another nice long test. I'm really bad at sparring, so I get punched in the nose frequently.
Oh my gosh.
But I can do the other things. Okay, I can get out of a choke on the ground, and I can put someone in a good guillotine choke. So I think that's surprising.
Yeah, it is. Explain to people real quick what Krav Maga is.
So it's basically a self-defense type of exercise, and it's adopted by Israeli police force and Israeli military. And it's not, so I might get in trouble with, Krav Maga leadership here, but it's not as graceful and artistic as you see with regular martial arts. This is basically a very fast and furious and violent way to get danger away from you and, defend yourself. So the interactions are high power, high intensity, and you should be able to be done within 3 to 5 seconds.
Holy smoke.
And I'm not there, obviously.
But that is something surprising people can learn about you. I didn't see that coming.
Right. I mean, everybody knows I'm a mother of 3 boys because I just wear that, on my name badge. I'm the mother of 3 boys. So yeah, I think that might be a little different. Boys better not mess with mom. Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Well, hey, let's dive into all things UIC and start with some of those curricular highlights, that the things that when, you and I are bumping into each other at all these different recruiting events from time to time, when somebody walks up to your table or you're going out to do a talk at a university some afternoon or evening, what are those highlights that you want them to know about those first couple years of school at UIC?
So I have a big piece of news that I want to share with your listeners. And that is that we were just approved for a reduction in our tuition by the Board of Trustees.
It's a big deal.
I think it's a huge deal for us because we are one of the older medical schools and we're in an expensive city, and our tuition, we felt, really wasn't in alignment with the mission that we have, not only to serve the citizens of the state, but also we think of ourselves as a global institution, and to make healthcare education accessible, we felt that wasn't really in alignment with the mission. So I'm really ecstatic to be here right now to be able to say that we've had this tuition reduction both for in and out of state students at a public university.
Yeah, I saw that article. I'll put a link to that article in the show notes. Yeah, yep. And
awesome. Thank you.
From what I saw, it looked like it will reduce by 2.1% for in-state students and reduced by, I think, 16% for out-of-state students. That's a big. That's significant. Mm-hmm.
It is.
Wow.
It's significant. It's significant for us. And obviously we're taking care of our current students as well.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, something definitely to crow about. You don't see too many schools doing that.
No, I mean, I would like my next blast to be about we have free tuition for all, but we're not there yet.
We all went on that boat. Yep, we all went on that one. Oh, wow. Good news. That's great news.
Yes.
So, okay. Hey, maybe before we get into the curricular things, you are a multi-campus model. Do you want to explain that first before we do that dive into the curricular highlights? Does that sound like a good idea?
Absolutely. Okay. So you're right. We are a multi-campus model, and once we implemented the new curriculum back in 2017, the other campuses, so our Peoria campus and our Rockford campus, also became 4-year campuses, which is really exciting for us. So originally we would bring students either to Chicago or to our Urbana campus, where they would do their basic sciences, and then they would move for their clinical rotations to the other campuses. So there was a little bit of movement for students and adjustment. And with the new curriculum, we were able to make sure that students just started at their home campus and stayed there. So basically, when a student applies to us, they're applying to the system. And based on the content of their application, we do our best to invite them for interview to a campus that seems to be in alignment with professional goals that they have for themselves. Part of our secondary asks students to tell us what else they'd like to do. And what they'd like to do is, as much as possible, cater to some of the unique opportunities that are available on our other campuses. For example, rural health. Really, we don't touch that in Chicago, but both Rockford and Peoria have really strong rural health programs. Right. And so we will invite students to interview on those campuses so they get a better sense of what those resources are. And once a student is accepted, they're accepted to the system, and we ask them to rank their campus in order of preference, and then we'll work with them to place them on the campus that's the best fit for them professionally.
Okay, that makes sense now. Okay, because I was wondering when I was doing my homework how this all kind of works, and maybe we can get into that a little bit when we talk about the application process a little bit more in a little bit. Okay, so you said you implemented a new curriculum in 17. What are some of those highlights? What does that look like in the first 2 years?
Yeah, so we've moved away from calling our students first, second, and third, fourth year medical students. I mean, obviously time is time, so it is a first year that they're in medical school, but we look at our curriculum as phases. Okay. So the first phase is really that didactic part for them. That's where they're getting their instruction, learning how to become evidence-based clinical decision makers, understanding what integrated curriculum looks like and how it unfolds. Where does the science feed into taking care of patients, and how does that translate into the art of medicine? So that's phase one for us. And phase one will obviously start with the first year, goes into the second year that a student is in medical school, and ends at the time that they take a break to take the STEP exam. Okay. So phase two will start in May. So really, there'll be a quote unquote, functionally a third year medical student doing clinical rotations, but they're still second year in the medical school. And so that'll be phase 2. Phase 2 will end, and then phase 3 will be their last year, which we consider the, internship preparation basically for them. So they have some mandatory courses that they take, and then they spend some time doing externships if they want to do them, or elective. But the phase 2 also is now for us 48 weeks. And 44 weeks are mandatory clinical rotations. So students have 4 years of 4 weeks of elective time. So they can do research, they can do additional rotations, they can wrap up papers if that's what they've been working on. So that's really a good time for them to kind of get things nicely packaged before they move into that last phase.
Wow. Okay. So in phase 1 is the design of the curriculum primarily lecture based? Is it a hybrid of lecture and small group, or TBL? What are those details?
I love that. And it's a combination of everything. So every trick that we have and every tool that we have in the toolkit of ways to communicate with students, we bring out for students. There's, I love it. Our Senior Associate Dean of Educational Affairs always says that, you are all coming in as adult learners with very specific needs and very specific ideas of how you learn and what's the best way for you to learn. But the goal is to have a product at the end. All of you need to be performing at a similar level. So the challenge is, how do you provide that curriculum so that all of you get what you need to get you to that end point, where you can all perform. So yeah, it's everything. There's a lot of TBL, there's a lot of PBL, there's some mandatory lectures. So the curriculum is set up in blocks. And so we have a block 0 that's actually a pre-matriculation block. It starts in July, and it's, the right before school starts, it ends. And it's self-directed. It's not mandatory. And it's basically a review of all of the basic science that our faculty would like a student to come to us prepared, to handle. And that shows a nice predictive model, has a good predictive model for us on how students will fare in the blocks that follow after. So if a student completes these blocks, this block takes the test, does the final, generally they perform better as they're going through the blocks. And the first block is considered, equilibrium, what is homeostasis, what's quote unquote normal. Second block is pathology, disequilibrium. And then third block starts going into the organs. And that's where our students have clinical exposure. They're in the anatomy lab. That's where it all becomes beautifully integrated for them.
When you mentioned the block 0, the pre-matriculation block, do students opt into this, or are some students kind of identified and invited to come to it? Or is it just open to everybody?
We invite everyone to participate, but not everyone does.
Okay, but okay, wow. Yeah. What about
material?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say material from that block is available to students throughout. So it's not like we open that block up and then we shut it down once school starts, because sometimes students may want to go back and revisit something in micro or biochem that would be helpful. In the current block.
Oh, that's cool. What other special programs or things can students get involved in those first couple of years? Can they start doing research in the first couple of years?
There's so much, Christian, so I don't know how much time we have. Okay.
You tell me. You share with me what you want people to know.
Sure. So I would say when you look at our mission, the students that we bring in really reflects the mission. So, research is one of the pillars of our mission. And so about a third of our students who come in with a lot of undergraduate research and just jump into research early on. Last year, we had a student who started research as an M0. So he partnered up with one of our faculty members, and he was already in town, and he started his research summer preceding medical school. So yes, they can start research as early as possible. We have a host of what we call scholarly concentration programs. It's all on our website, Innovation Medicine, Urban Medicine. Yeah. So all of those students would apply to post-acceptance pre-matriculation, and those go hand in hand with our 4-year curriculum. We have patient-centered medicine, which is exactly what it sounds like. It really gets our students focused with our patients, and that's a 4-year model. And so the students will adopt X number of families, 4 to 5, and they will just work with them throughout the 4 years that they are here with us.
That's great.
And then obviously there's all the volunteering and the community service that all of our medical schools have.
Yeah.
That are
Okay. Common question that we get, Layla, is students always want to know, how early do I get to go out and see patients? When do I start seeing patients? And you said block 3, I think is what you said.
So block 3 is where they're evaluated and they're instructed.
Okay.
Because that comes into the integrated curriculum. They can start as early as week 1.
Oh, really?
That is not part of the curriculum, so that would be more shadowing and volunteering.
Okay.
Not necessarily part of what they're doing for their education with us. However, participating in the standardized patient arena starts from the beginning.
Okay.
But those aren't real patients. Obviously, they're SPs.
Yeah. But so what you're saying is, so I'm a new student at UIC and I get my white coat and my badge. I can start, if I wanted to, in block 0, start emailing attendings or residents or something and say, hey, I'm a new student here. Can I come check out what you're doing in this specialty?
So block 0 generally, well, they won't have their white coat yet.
Okay.
But so because that's before they matriculate. So during orientation, which will be, the first week of class, yes. To give you a little bit more about that, so our students run a mentoring program. I think there's about 100 faculty members that are participating in this from the different specialties. So our current first year students will reach out to the incoming students and tell them, hey, we've got this mentoring program with these disciplines. Is anyone interested in having a mentor from this area? So, anesthesia, hem-onc, peds, you name it, they're there. And so each of the faculty members who are participating can take a small number of students into their mentoring model. Now, in addition to that, we're moving towards having advising houses for the students that are coming in. And so the student will come into an advising house and they'll stay with that same house all the way through their curriculum, even if they have to break for a PhD, an MBA, or something like that. And obviously, those will facilitate not only the advising but also opportunities to shadow. So we get a lot of requests for shadowing for surgery. And I mentioned anesthesia because that's a big one. Peds is a big one. So students are always looking for additional mentors in those areas.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad you explained that, because it sounds like there is some more formalized mentoring available there, instead of, you don't have to feel like you have to go out and cast your own net and find people that are willing to allow you to come in and hang out with them and kind of observe what they're doing early on. I like that. That's really cool. What are some of those, any other special programs or things that students are involved in the community? I have to believe that in you just being a few short miles from downtown Chicago, there's all kinds of opportunities for students at the Chicago campus to get involved in the community. And how does that differ from the other, or is there similar things at the other hospital or at the other mid school campuses?
Sure. So, obviously being a medical school, much of the outreach that our students do is in the clinical arena. So there's a couple of free clinics that our students participate in here in Chicago. We've got 2 high schools that we've adopted, and our students show up at those high schools. This is a structured program that was originally housed in the emergency medicine department, but has now moved to a different area in the college with the urban health program. So we have current medical students who go out every week in an instructional capacity. So they work in conjunction with the science teachers at those schools to introduce health professions. And this is a joint effort with all of the health sciences colleges. So it'll be dentistry, pharmacy, nursing goes out there. All of the allied health professions have representatives that go out. But the point is that they go out on a weekly basis.
That's fantastic.
And touch base with the students. Then we have programs where we bring in high school students from local high schools, particularly ones that are under-resourced. So we provide train passes for them. They come in, they spend the afternoon with our students here, and this includes also undergraduate students from other side of campus. And that's basically a tutoring time. If anybody needs any tutoring, they need help with their homework, if it's ACT, SAT prep that they need help with, looking into colleges to apply to, writing that personal statement that nobody wants to write. So it's that whole, world of things that would be helpful for high school students. And then for that program also, there's visits from all of the health sciences college as well. So they will invite all of us at different times to come in and talk about our programs and introduce them to the health professions.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, they're far removed because they're in high school, but these are young students that probably wouldn't be thinking about a career in medicine, a dentistry, for examil, without having had that kind of exposure.
Yeah, it could be really influential for a young person to see some of these med students coming in and mentoring them and being inspirational to them. I think that's great. What about when it comes to the clinical curriculum, maybe looking at the 3rd/4th year, the phase 3, what hospitals are the hospitals near the Chicago campus that the students are doing rotations in, or are they going to other parts of Chicago to do those?
So all of the above for all of our campuses. So we obviously have the UI Health system is right across the street from the medical school, and the county hospital is right across the street from us as well. Then we have other affiliations with other hospitals here in the city. It's the same model at Rockford and Peoria. They all have clinical affiliates, like 25 of them, because some of them are very rural. As I mentioned, those could be considered our 2 rural campuses. And so sometimes our students are driving a little bit. They're driving 35 to 40 miles to get to small clinics, maybe, a hospital that has 25 beds. To take care of patients. Those students also spend, depending on what program they're in, up to 24 weeks with a rural healthcare provider, basically working with them, shoulder to shoulder with a physician there, just getting a good sense of what rural health really looks like in underserved communities. So it's a broad range of experiences. And because we have different campuses, our students are allowed to go to the other campuses. Now, whatever campus they're assigned to is where they do their required rotations for phase 2. But for those electives, they can go to the different sites just to get a sense of that. Yeah, because we see parallels between rural health disparities and disparities that we see in urban settings. So, the setting is different, but in terms of lack of access and reasons that patients don't come in or things that are barriers to delivering and receiving good health care, we see similarities. And so it's always helpful to have the students have that additional exposure.
Yeah, sure. That's great. When I think one thing I if I was a student, I would be asking about is, okay, so the main campus is in Chicago. Where do students live? Is finding housing an issue in that area?
Not in this area at all. So we have a small number of professional and graduate student dorms available on campus, but very few medical students stay at them, and those are literally across the street from us, across the street from the medical school. So a lot of students live within blocks of the medical school here. And then, Chicago is a city of neighborhoods. And so they end up in Pilsen, they end up in Wicker Park, Logan Square. So it just depends on where they want to be. Some of them are from Evanston, which is a little bit of a hike. But they want to be away from school when they're away from school. So it just depends on where they want to be. We've got University Village that's right here outside of campus, and a lot of our students live there. So they're all over. And it's affordable, even though Chicago is a relatively expensive place to live. Places around campus are not too expensive.
Okay. So what I kind of heard you saying there a little bit was that it sounds like there might be some time for fun. Do students have time to have some fun time or their own personal time?
I'm laughing because our students do a presentation in the morning on interview day, and the last part of it is the things that they do outside of medical school, and that part of the slideshow goes on forever because of all the great things that they do. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So, we have a lot of students who are interested in the arts, musicians, we have athletes. So all of that continues. What we tell them is we've intentionally built time in the schedule to allow you to do those things that made you who you are, right? So beyond those fun things that they do, they hang out with each other a lot. So they do cruises together, they do hiking trips together. They, went out west and they brought back their pictures from when they've done their hiking trips. There's ample opportunity for them. We've got the intramurals, so they have lots of fun.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So, what do you hear from your current students that they say that they like the most about their medical school experience at UIC? What do you hear kind of, anecdotally?
Yeah. So, we're starting up a admissions ambassadors program. And so one of the questions is, what do you like most about here? And everyone always says their classmates.
That's cool.
And I love to hear that. So that's their first response. The other thing that they talk about is the faculty. And I actually shared this with a couple of our deans a few days ago. They had heard, quote unquote, that UIC takes care of its students, and they didn't know what that meant. So they show up here and they have time to sit with our senior leadership, voice their questions, comments, concerns, and they feel heard. And so they're surprised when they come across that dean again in the hallway and there's follow-up from her on something that they had talked about, 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago. So it's not a surprise for them anymore because now they've been here for a few months. I'm talking about the first years, obviously. So those two things. So to me, it seems that it's the culture. I mean, it's a new curriculum, and for first year students, it takes time just to get used to studying at a different level and a different pace. So, it was interesting. One of them said to me, I finally figured out how to do medical school because, block 1, I didn't even know what was going on. Block 2, I was hiccuping a bit, and I finally figured out, how to do medical school. And that seems to be, it takes them a little bit of time to get adjusted. And along the way, they love having the support of their peers.
Oh, yeah.
And the leadership.
So important. That's so important because I think probably anybody that goes to medical school at anywhere is going to have a learning curve wherever you wind up. And so it's nice to know that the students feel supported from their classmate level and from their administrative level there. Is there something, Layla, that you wish people knew about UIC that you can't find that doesn't come through on a nice website or in literature that when you're out talking to people that you want them to know about your institution? We're one of the bigger med schools with a class of 300. And so I think the thought is that I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to be a number that, the admissions process is what it is. And then I show up and I'm just one of the many. And whenever I have face-to-face time with students, I always want to share that that's really not the case. We do everything that we possibly can to make this an individualized experience from the beginning when a student, submits an application all the way through their experience with us. So I don't want our size and our volume to be in any way perceived as students are under the radar and we're not paying attention to them. Everyone gets a lot of individualized attention. Some of them would probably even argue, too much. Right? Our Associate Dean of Medical Education made it very clear that, if I see any concerns about, academic performance or anything, I'm going to call you in and have a conversation with you, not to make you feel bad, but just to make sure that you're getting everything that you need from us. And, there's a lot of them. There's 180 students just here on the Chicago campus. And for her to be able to pay that much attention to the students, I think speaks, a lot about what we try to do here with our classes. You care. You care about them.
We do.
It's I think what I tell prospective students and applicants is that usually what most students, when they get to medical school, are going to be able to handle the rigor. And like you said, when your vice dean will sometimes call a student if they think they're struggling, I think it's usually because they want to know, is there something going on outside of school that's going on in your life right now that maybe we need to help with or support you through? Because usually it's not the academics that cause students problems. It's things that happen outside of school that takes away their focus, because life throws you curveballs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And whether that's something personal or some family issue. And that's where the administration can step in and offer some support and let you know where you're not alone. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay. Any other things you'd like people to know about UIC before we I always like to I feel like we're whetting the listeners' appetite with telling them all these great things about your institution. And now let's talk about, but before we do, let's talk about the application process. Did we kind of touch all the bases? We hit a little bit about research. We talked a little bit about clinical opportunities and community activities and how the administrative system seems to support students. Is there anything else we'd left dangling out there?
I don't know if it's dangling, but we very much develop and encourage our students into leaders. Because that's part of our mission as well. And so from very early on, we have a strong leadership model for each of the campuses. So each campus has a medical student council with, president and different representatives and class presidents. And then we have the University Medical Student Council that has oversight over the 3 campuses. And so helping them develop into leaders in a space where it's safe to make a little mistake here or there and learn from it is important to us as well. So just wanted to add that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's important to have that student voice throughout different parts of the institution, the student government. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so everybody's excited now about UIC. So let's walk them through kind of the application process. So you send your secondary out to everybody. Is that right?
We
verified.
Don't.
No. Okay.
We don't. We don't send a secondary. Yeah, we don't send a secondary out to everyone, and I don't have a hard threshold. So this is a manual process that we look to some students because not everything comes out easily, right? Sometimes you get an MCAT or a GPA, particularly that's just an undergraduate, and the student has a postbac with a 4.0. So I don't really have a threshold that I can share with our listeners right now. I would just say if a student is in a single-digit percentile for the MCAT, probably we're not going to invite them to complete a secondary. But we don't invite everyone to complete a secondary because we only want to encourage those students to apply who we feel have a viable chance of being considered for admission. It's a small proportion of students that don't receive the secondary from us, but still not everyone gets it.
Yeah. Well, in a way, I know it's tough to hear that sometimes, but it's a way to be cruel to be kind. Like, save your money because I'm sure your secondary is not free.
Right.
And so it's a way to kind of say, to send a message, I think, that, that doesn't look like it's going to work out here. Save your secondary fee money and maybe use that to put towards another MCAT retake or something else. So I appreciate that. So my understanding is, you've used Casper before. Is that going to be a part of your application process going forward? I know you and I spoke a while ago that you were using it a little bit, or having students take the test, but you weren't actually using the score. Is that going to continue, or have you changed your mind on that?
So since we spoke last time, we have a new associate dean for admissions. And so there's still some data mining going on and figuring out if there is additional value that the CASPER brings to our evaluation process or not, particularly now that we have 3 years of data. This year, we required the CASPER. So we'll see what it looks like at the end of this year, and particularly the first group of students will, by that time, be done with their third year.
Oh,
so we
right.
can look for other
Some of those outcomes
indicators.
data. Yeah.
Exactly. Particularly in the clinical area, the CASPER isn't expected to predict their performance, in basic science courses. So obviously we haven't seen much there. We do have a paper out, and there were nice relationships between CASPER scores and the professional identity metric that we have here. So we're still on the fence with that one.
Okay.
With the CASPER.
So prospective applicants going into the 2021 application cycle should just kind of stay tuned, or at least be aware that you may require it, you may not. You're still, right now, at the time we're recording this conversation, you're still kind of looking at it, but haven't made a final decision for the next application.
Right. So when I filled out the MSAR for this year, I put the CASPER as required because right now it is. And I don't know if the admissions committee will change their mind or not, but it'll have to be a quick decision, because obviously the application process will open up in a few months and students will begin registering for the CASPER. So we will make our minds up by that time.
Yeah.
But right now, every piece of literature from us shows that we do require the CASPER.
Okay,
still.
So if you do continue, let me just ask you, if you do continue to do it, do they have to have it done? Is that a part of a completed application, or does it have to be complete? Does the CASPER have to be completed prior to an interview invitation?
That's a great question. So we right now require it to make it a complete application. So for us, the students need to complete the CASPER by whatever the last test date is in November. The company hasn't released their test dates yet because our secondary closes in that first week of December. So they must take the CASPER at least within November to make it reasonable for them to actually have a chance at being screened and interviewed.
Right. Okay, so Layla, common question. We get this question all the time. What are you looking for? How does someone get into your school? What kind of characteristics or attributes or values are important to you as the admissions person reading applications that you're seeking in potential students?
Sure. So, I always start out with, what are the characteristics of your favorite physician? The doctor that takes care of you, that really does a great job and makes you feel comfortable. And there's some typical things that I'm sure you know what they are. And so basically that's what we want, right? We want someone who's empathetic, somebody who's knowledgeable, who won't treat you like a number, who will, treat you like a human being, who's a good listener. So we want all those things, however those characteristics can emerge. But as we're looking at the application, right, we want the motivation for medicine to come out clearly through the personal statement as much as possible, and for the activities and experiences to support that. So I think, we talk a lot about our social justice mission as an institution, UIC at large, and obviously the College of Medicine. And so our applicants are very familiar with that. And so we get a lot of those themes in the essays that we get. And so I always go to the experiences section to see what experiences are there that would suggest that a student has a genuine understanding of, injustices that are out there. What does a socially driven, mission-driven school look like? What would be the things that we would be doing? And then we've got 3 pillars in our mission. We are looking for excellence in at least one of those, right? So it would be research, service, healthcare delivery, parts of a student's application, which would speak to the mission that we have here at the university.
Oh, I hope people were really listening to that, because you just gave them some multiple clues right there as to when you're approaching the secondary and things to think about. And if you're a younger applicant, or, you're a freshman or sophomore and you're thinking about this, what things could you be doing and participating in that not just appeal maybe to UIC, but to maybe some other institutions that are mission driven, like you just said, that we want them to do things that they're interested in, but they should all do some things that they want to stretch themselves and explore a little bit and go outside those comfort zones. And that's cool. I mean, I hope they just heard what you said. If not, go back and rewind it, because what you just said there was really a lot of special insight that you just told them about, the things you value and what you're looking for, because we get that question all the time.
Yep.
And sometimes it's hard to explain to students in one soundbite what medical schools are looking for.
Right.
What's your biggest, and this is kind of a tough question, but when you're asked to give students advice, like what kind of things, where do you go to when you're giving prospective applicants advice? When somebody says, what's your biggest piece of advice for a prospective applicant? Or what would you tell me to do? What would be one thing you want me to do as a prospective applicant? How do you respond to something like that?
I mean, I always tell students that first and foremost, they need to be true to themselves. That I know at that point, they feel it's just about getting in. They need to get in. They don't care where it is. They just need to get in. And once they get in, it's going to be okay. And that's not true. If the institution is not one that supports what that student needs as an adult learner, it's not going to be okay, And I've had so many of these conversations. Well, I won't do that, for example. I will stick to my values. You don't really have a choice, right? If there's a particular model that they have for education, that's how you're evaluated. Yeah. So you either are that way or you're not. And there's some wiggle room, obviously, in how your interpersonal interactions with patients. But the other things are pretty clear, right? There's a diagnosis, you have to get it right. There's a particular expectation of how, you perform on these tests. So I always encourage students to, think about themselves, realize what environment, would make them happy. I mean, here I am in urban Chicago. The vast majority of our patients are uninsured, underinsured, from underrepresented communities, underserved communities. Those are the patients that our students have the privilege of serving and taking care of and learning from, right? If those are not types of patients that individuals want to work with, I'm not going to be a good school for them regardless of what's going on, because for a full year, they have to walk into the hospital and those are the patients that they have to take care of. And if that makes them uncomfortable for any reason, so we have a good number of patients that don't speak English, or we have signs in the hospital that are in Spanish and Polish. So these are all, this is all the reality of learning here with us. And so those things I think are very important. And applicants should really think about that and, know that we value them, obviously. We want them here as part of our team, walking with our faculty and learning from our faculty, and we want them to be comfortable. Wow. So it's not just about getting in somewhere. Get into the place that, makes you feel good about being there, that values you as a student, and that you're comfortable with. Great advice.
That's excellent advice.
Thank you.
What about when it comes to research? You had mentioned earlier there's opportunities to do research. The UIC is a very rich environment for research people with research interests. How do you value research on an application or not on an application that somebody does not have research?
So, I mean, for us, it's added value. It's not a requirement. So if a student generally speaking, the screening model has space for research as added value. And one of the things that we look at is the student's institution. So because we have rural programs and we recruit from rural communities, we do have students who come to us from under-resourced institutions where research is not a possibility for them, and that's not something that they're all interested in. So it's not a must-have, and it's not an application killer. But, when that's not there, then we will look for the other piece of our mission, right, which is service and healthcare delivery. So the expectation would be that they then have some clinical experiences for that. As I mentioned, we have about a third of our students that come in with a lot of research. So I would say like 1,000 hours of research or more in publications and advanced degrees. But about 70% of the students that we admit have had some kind of research experience.
It's pretty common.
Some of
now.
it's, You're absolutely right. And some of it's not real. So to me, a semester in the lab doesn't really count as research. You just went there, kind of dabbled a little bit, realized you didn't like it. You put it on your application because it's something you did, but it's 100 hours. It's not really a lot. So we wouldn't consider that added value and think of that student as a student who's going to come in and want a lot of research here with us. So we would look for other strengths in that application.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I asked that. And do you define research broadly? Like, not if I wasn't in a lab, but I was doing research in epidemiology, or I was doing some research in public health, does that equate to that added value portion in the rubric?
Absolutely.
Your screening. Okay. So I ask that because I want people, sometimes I think students hear research and they think pipetting and they think I got to be in a lab, but it can, I think most medical schools and our friends define research in other ways too. That it doesn't mean you have to be doing lab work.
Right. I think so I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the things that I've been just kind of thinking about for next round is maybe that research is changed to scholarship.
Yeah. Good point.
And not in scholarship in the larger context, not scholarships in terms of writing papers and producing scholarly, journals as it is. So we have students who, for example, have worked with faculty members in compiling massive lit reviews. So we have faculty member here who published a lit review that was either 683 or 783, something like that, an obnoxious number of references, right? And so, the references themselves, just a book in it. But so if you have a student participating in that, that's intense scholarship.
Yeah.
And so they're not pipetting and they're not collecting data, but my goodness, what a rich understanding they have of how to do a literature review and what do you pull in and how do you analyze this data and get it together. So I'm toying with that. It hasn't gone anywhere other than when it'll be public through this podcast, right? Yeah. But that's how I want to begin thinking about it and see if my committee's open to it.
What if somebody does a lot of schools have a senior thesis or a capstone project, and it may be in anthropology or fine arts. Would you consider that? I think that would fall into that scholarly work, but would you consider that as one of those research kind of components?
So we would, and obviously it's probably not going to be 1,000 hours because it'll be a semester or two. But all of we have a large, we have a cohort of students who come in with engineering interests, and because we have an innovation medicine program and a strong engineering college, all of those students bring a senior thesis project to the table, and the number of hours that they log for that is a small number. They put in 150 or 250 hours, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when I talk to them, it's really intense and it's a lot of work. So clearly that would count as research for us.
Oh, good. I'm glad I asked that because that clarifies a lot. What about last question before we I want to talk about the interview day, but before we do that, just in general, I think a question I've been hearing a lot lately, and I'm sure you have too. How do you feel about gap years before I submit an application? Are you a fan of those? And if so, what are the advantages or disadvantages of gap years in your opinion?
So I'm a fan of if a student feels that they need it, right? So we don't give anyone credit because they took a gap year because they felt that it would look good for us. So I always tell a student, look to yourself. If you feel you need a gap year for whatever reason, please take the gap year. And there's no doubt that if they've done things over a year, that's additional experiences that they bring to the table. So I don't encourage students to take a gap year if they don't feel like they need one. But even if they need time to de-stress and recompose and just work for a year before they're ready to take on med school, that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So if a student takes a gap year, it's perfectly fine. It needs to make sense in their developmental cycle. And if given an opportunity, generally I'll ask, talk to me about your gap year. What did you learn? How are you better now than you were before? How has this helped you? And it doesn't necessarily only need to help them in being a healthcare provider. It can be towards their development. as they transition.
As a matter of fact, just today I interviewed a candidate, and she had taken a couple gap years, and she just said, one of the benefits or things I learned about was just how to pay my own bills and how to, just be responsible. And I have to be she's working a job. I got to be places at 8:00 in the morning and working with people that are different than my peer group from undergrad. And she said, I've really grown and learned a lot just in this last couple years of being off on my own. And she goes, I feel like I have now some transferable skills, or I'm ready when I start med school. I'm not going to have to go through that like I just did and have medical school on top of me. So I think there's some opportunities to grow and develop in ways that doesn't seem obvious or on the surface when you say, I'm going to take a gap year.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to gain some other skills and be able to feed and take care of yourself as a med student. So I've submitted my application. I did all the things. You loved what you read about me, and you invite me for an interview. What's the interview day experience like at UIC?
Sure. So we like interview day to feel like a celebration.
Oh, that's fun.
So we are super excited. As I shared with you earlier, the applications are fabulous. Students show up on campus. They're even, more incredible when we get to meet them. So we want to celebrate that they're there with us. And so we start off with about 45 minutes of our students being there and them just chatting and having conversation without administrators hovering around, listening to the conversations. Then we go around the room, introduce ourselves, share fun things. Then we have a presentation from our student leadership team talking about student life and leadership opportunities for students and how students have a voice in our curriculum and how things are run. We orient them to the day. We've done something fun this year, and it was, students go around hearing about integrated curriculum, and we weren't certain how much they knew what that felt like. Mm-hmm. And so, my secret plan for interview day always is for a student to come on campus and for some time forget that they're interviewing.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just step out of yourself in this, and regardless of what the application looked like and how self-confident they are, this is still a high-stakes kind of exercise for them.
Right.
And so I thought, what would be more indicative of how we function as a medical school than for them to walk away having learned something apart from how many buildings we have and, who our founding dean was and how much grant money we have.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a art and science of medicine lecture for them. And so our admissions dean, our associate dean for admissions, who's an emergency medicine physician and a toxicologist as well, does a lecture. It's a biochemistry lecture, and it basically goes from the very basic fundamental science all the way to a diagnosis.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's about an hour long, and he's very engaging and it's very interactive. And there's a quote unquote quiz at the end of the day, not a real one, but tell me something that you learned. And so at that point, they're not expecting to have something like that necessarily, and we feel that it gives them a glimpse into, you talk about integrated curriculum. Why does it make sense? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we launch into interviews. So we have a hybrid model. We do MMI and we have one-on-one faculty interviews.
Okay.
Yeah. So students will go through, we have 7 MMI stations at 5 minutes each. Yeah. And so they'll do that. Then there's lunch and more celebration. I invite everyone to lunch, and I let them know, whoever comes first gets fed first. So I have a limited amount of food, right? But the room is always packed. Yeah. And then there's a tour, and we do some more interviews in the afternoon. We get, financial aid presentation and a wrap up, just so they'll know what to expect from us. So it's a full day.
Yeah, sounds like it. They get to meet you. You're involved in the days?
Of course.
Yeah. I love that. Just so that what I found is like sometimes when listeners, they hear your voice and then I've heard, they show up on the interview day and it's like, oh, I feel like I kind of know you, like, cause they've heard this. And so it's fun. I'm glad that they then get to meet you on the interview day. You're not like behind a curtain somewhere, kind of pulling the levers and making things work.
No. And if I can just comment on what you said. So I participated in a different podcast about a year ago. And this year I've had more, several students who've come up to me and tell me that they heard that other podcast.
Oh, that's great.
And that it's fun to put a face with a voice. Uh-huh. So I'm looking forward to get that feedback from this podcast as well.
As an MMI institution, what is because this is kind of a unique interview situation when you do MMI, what's your advice to students that are preparing for MMI at UIC or at any other schools that do this in general? What's your general kind of advice to them?
Yeah. So, so the MMI pool of questions, it's thousands. It's 5,000 or 6,000 questions. I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot of questions, right? So you put in personality traits that you're hoping to assess, and the system spits out all these questions, and you go through them one by one and see which one, works for your institution. So we spent a lot of time. First of all, figuring out which attributes do we want, and then which of these questions are we comfortable with. We wanted the questions to be easy questions. And I always tell candidates on interview day, I don't know what you've heard about MMI. I wasn't a believer in MMI because, as you know me, I'm a talker. I love sitting there and talking to the students, right? I like that half hour, 45 minutes to just sit there and, what are you reading? And, those types of things. So I hated that. I've got 5 minutes and I've got structured questions that I have to go about. So we picked things that, and I jokingly tell them that if I knock on your door at 2:00 in the morning and, you're not mad at me, you should be able to answer this question because this is something that's just coming from you as you are. It's not something that you had to prepare for. And the feedback that we've received so far is that it really was that the questions made them think a little, but it was something that was easy for them to answer because it really got to, how they think about things or how they function, as a person. So I'm glad about that.
Yeah, that's good feedback to get. It sounds like it's always going to be stressful, right? It's like you said,
absolutely.
This is a high stakes day. So there's going to be some stress involved in that, but it sounds like you're trying to set a tone. And I like that you're saying, look, you're going to ask you questions, but they're not the kind of things where you're going to have to feel you need this enormous background in philosophy or in medically related sciences to answer.
Yeah, none of that. None of that. I just don't think it's fair.
So
we don't expect them to answer, difficult ethical medical questions before they've had an opportunity to engage in discussion and instruction about that.
Right. But
none of that.
But there is still a component in your process where they do get a one-on-one meeting with, would you say, a faculty member? Is that a half hour or is that a shorter period of time?
It's a half hour. So our MMI facilitators are pretty much blind to the application, except if I'm stepping in because someone had to call out last minute or one of the assistant directors is stepping in. The one-on-one faculty interview is really designed to let the student gauge us for fit as far as our faculty members serving as a mentor for them. And when our faculty sit across from them, I tell them on interview day, they are engaging with you just as they do with an incoming first-year medical student, which is as a junior colleague and a young mentee. And so they really want to see how you would fit here.
Okay.
And that's what the conversation is all about, And our faculty members have two parts of the application, really the parts that we feel speak to our mission, the personal statement and the supplemental. We leave the activities out intentionally because I want the candidate to have the freedom to pull in whatever they feel is more relevant to the conversation that they're having right now.
That's very thoughtful.
And, So half an hour with the faculty members. which sometimes becomes 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 50 minutes.
So there is some time there to kind of have that one-on-one conversation that you talked about earlier that you said you missed, that the faculty member the student can bring up other things that, they're interested in reading or they have outside interests. Okay. So there's a little bit more wiggle room in that one-on-one to share more about themselves.
Absolutely.
Or things in their application they wanted to make sure that they address. Like I know sometimes some students, they had like a really rough sophomore year and they want to be able to convey what was going on that year to somebody in person, that there's time to do something like that.
So that there isn't time to, so the faculty don't see the transcript.
Okay.
They trust that the screening process brings in students who can take a test and who can, handle the curriculum based on whatever data we have until that point.
Right. Okay.
Now, one of our supplemental questions is, talk about a challenge and how you overcame it. So if that was something that they described, they have an opportunity to expand on that if they wish, or clearly the faculty member can address that.
Okay.
As a supplemental question. But if someone had a rough semester and they didn't talk about it in their personal statement or the supplemental, faculty member doesn't know that happened. Mm-hmm. And the screening committee, which is basically our admissions committee, has already worked through it. Mm-hmm. So they were okay with the hiccup that was there, and the student has recovered to their satisfaction, and we're not going to talk about it right now.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
Okay, so then they go to the admissions committee process and the decisions are made and evaluated, everything that happened on interview day and all those things. What if an applicant's not accepted right out of the gate in your admissions process and they wind up on the wait list? Do you want to hear from them at all, or can they send updates, or would you rather them kind of hold off and wait to hear from you?
I love hearing from students. We even accept updates before we've invited students for interview. Okay. Because things happen once you hit submit that, if you hadn't hit submit 3 days ago, you would have had heard back, from this other thing. So yeah, we like to hear from them. And it might be a little confusing because we have a delayed decision status, which is not necessarily waitlist, since the waitlist process for us begins after April 30th. So a delayed decision student is a student who a final decision hasn't been made on their application. So they haven't been accepted yet, but they're still going to be reviewed possibly at the next committee meeting. So those are students that I encourage even more than others, talk to us about our fit for you. How did we feel for you? Do we have what you want and what you feel you need? And then obviously, give us updates, because they will go back to committee. We meet once a month. They go back to committee for review again.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good tip. Wow. So there's some schools that say, no, we'll contact you. Don't contact us. But you're in the camp of, hey, if we're high on your list or you think we're a great fit, you want to know.
Yep. Absolutely.
Do those updates come, should they send them to you, or is there a mechanism within the application itself that you send those updates through your secondary portal or something?
Yeah, they can upload it into the application portal. So we use AMP, and there's a place where it says other documents upload, and so they just add it to the other documents, and that's viewable for our admissions committee.
Well, did we hit on all the things about your application process that you think is important for people to know about?
I think so. I think one of the things that's happening right now is that because the season's starting to wind down, and for those students who haven't heard from us, we're getting recommendation letters from other faculty and individuals who are, encouraging us to consider their application. And we only accept letters of recommendations through the AMCAS letter writer portal. So it pains me, but I, have to thank the faculty member and let them know that I can't accept this letter, and it has to come to us through the AMCAS portal. And the portal doesn't close. I checked with AMCAS because I thought once my secondary closed, students couldn't upload letters, and I learned that they can. So they upload the letters. We just have to let them know to allow us to download it.
Yeah.
And so if I can add that in there, I think it would be helpful, because it takes faculty members a long time too to write a new letter, and we can't accept it. And I hate sending it back. To me, it almost verges on being disrespectful, but I also want to be fair to everyone who has submitted letters through the proper channel, which is through the MCAS letter portal.
Yep, I get it. And it's a process issue too. We do the same thing. I hate doing
it. Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah. Please send it through, AMCAS, and for processing, it just makes because we have to, people maybe don't appreciate how much we have to handle going through this whole massive AMCAS application process, and all these little things that come in from time to time. It can add up, and we all have bare bones staff. So I get it. I get what you're talking about from a processing standpoint.
Right. I mean, talk about bare bones staff. Right now in my office, it's myself and one other staff member. So it's Liz and me, and that's it. We have an amazing graduate student, professional student. He's a pharmacy student. So Sal keeps us afloat, but it's basically, so talk about bare bones. Bare bones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're at the helm, so that ship is, they couldn't have a better person at the helm of that ship, because you know what you're doing. No, you're a pro. You are an absolute pro. Layla, I'm glad you brought up letters of recommendation, because I think you and I are kind of talking before we hit record on this, that I think it's kind of getting to be letters of rec season a little bit, where student applicants that are getting ready to apply in the spring, we're thinking about who they might be, faculty members they want to start to approach about writing a letter. So if you have time, I have some listener questions about specifically letters of recommendation. Can I hit you with a few of them, and we can kind of go back and forth on them? Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. So here we go. So I have a few people send in some questions, and here's the first one. This one comes from, her name's Maddie, and she's at UCLA. And she says, I asked my chem professor to write me a letter of recommendation. Other than commenting on my performance in the classroom, he asked me, what else should he comment on about me? What kind of things should be included in a letter of recommendation beyond the performance in the classroom? What do you say to that?
So, I tell students, commenting on the performance in the classroom is almost wasted verbiage in the letter, right? Because we see the grade, right? Yeah. So if they provide context, which they sometimes do, they'll say, my class has 270 students in it, and Maddie was in the top 1%. And of all the students that I've ever taught at UCLA, she stands out. Yeah. So that's performance that, is really meaningful, because if that person has been teaching for 30 years and she stands out as a top 1%, then that's something. But sometimes faculty will just say, she got an A in my class, and I saw that already. So really what we would like to see from faculty members is, a description of the intellectual curiosity of the student, their ability to analyze the information, their ability to synthesize the information, really how they engaged with the material. And so those things are helpful. Oftentimes, generally faculty will ask for a CV or resume, and then they will copy and paste what was on the resume into the letter, which again is not helpful, because we have that, right? So they'll say, Maddie got an A, and I'm really impressed because of all these other things that she's done. And those other things are basically the things that the student has done. Yeah. So this requires work on the part of the student, right? So they need to show up to office hours more than once, engage with the professor more than once, so the faculty member can actually see how this person is as a learner. And that's what to me is most meaningful from a letter that we can get from a faculty member that no other person can provide, right? A peer can't, a volunteer coordinator can't. I mean, they can talk about a person's intellectual capabilities, but it's not in an academic setting. So those are the types of things that I think would be helpful. And it's hard to tell the professor, put that in there. But if they've been there to the, person's office 5 times, 7 times, then what you say is, well, it would be good for them to hear about the kind of conversations that we've had, or the type of questions that I've brought for you, or how you think I compare to other students that you've had, in your career, or so the student can guide the faculty member on those things. And I would say discourage them from telling us that they volunteered. I mean, you've seen these letters as well, right? They're not that helpful.
Yeah. I think before we go any farther, I want to let people know that I'm going to put a link in the show notes that AAMC has a really nice, you've seen that guide about letter writers, and it kind of goes through some of these components that you talked about, like the intellectual curiosity or capacity and communication skills, and some of those intangibles that students, an applicant can print it out and maybe take it with them and say, hey, if here's some suggested things that you could put in the letter from the service that takes these letters, to other things to consider as kind of a guide. If the letter writer doesn't quite know, or says, hey, what else do you want me to tell them about you? You can kind of maybe lead them with that printout of this document. I'll put in the show notes. It's awesome though. And it's a great piece of literature.
I completely agree. And I always, that's in my presentation where I, when I, go to places and do med school presentations, that's always on there.
Yeah, it's a great piece. It's a great resource. Okay. How about this one? Heather from Williams College wants to know, how many letters of rec is too many? If a school requires, like they say 3 to 5 and I have 6, is it okay to send that 6th letter?
So is it okay to send the 6th letter? Of course.
Okay.
Right. It doesn't seem like you're not following the rules. However, I would say, think about it. Is this 6th letter really giving us any information that we haven't already seen? Right. So if it does, then do it. If the information's that different, why isn't it one of your original 5? So I think students need to be careful about requesting additional letters. So we read them all. We only require 3, but I've had 7, I've had 6. And when I look at them, basically it's same version of, just from a different person, particularly when it's a copy and paste of the CV. And so in that case, it's a little bit hurtful for the student when I look at it, from 30,000 foot perspective, because it's like, okay, so now I have 5 letters from this student. None of her faculty members know her well enough to write anything outside of the CV that she handed to all of them.
Yep.
Right. And so in that case, it's not helpful. It's a little hurtful if I'm going to look at it that way. But I never say, okay, this person has a 6th letter, I'm excited to see if there's new information. Generally, there isn't anything, extra. So I would say it's not hurtful, except if it's just going to be another one of one we've already seen.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if Heather has her component, like her professors that she needs for like maybe 2 sciences and whatever the requirements are, but then there's that 6 letters from an employer or from a supervisor from something, or her lab or something that is a part of her application, but not related to a classroom thing that could add some additional insight or shed some light on who she is in another environment outside the classroom.
Absolutely.
That kind of gets to this next question that we got from, let's see, Trevor. He goes to Davidson College. He says, do medical schools like to see a letter from a physician I've shadowed? If it's not required by a med school, is it kind of an unspoken requirement to have a letter from a physician?
So you can help me with this one, actually, because, I can only speak for my school, right? So it's not an unspoken.
We're just talking about us. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I don't want to speak for all med schools. I would say we don't require a letter from a physician. And with all due respect for all of the physicians that take the time to write these letters, generally what they tell us is the student was well-spoken, they were pleasant, they were polite, and they seemed attentive. We would expect nothing less, right? As a person who's applying to medical school, I would expect you to be dressed professionally, to be polite, to be respectful. If it's anything other than that, then there's other issues that we're dealing with. So there are certain physician letters that we've received that have just been outstanding because they have engaged with the student, right? So they debrief about the patient, for example. Sometimes they allow the student to engage with the patient, and then there's more insight. So as I've observed this person, for example, in my office. Or that day after we were done, we sat down and debriefed about the 27 patients that I saw in my clinic. Yeah. And the student had a lot of insightful comments or insightful questions. So that type of letter is incredible, right? It makes particularly the physicians on the committee, it gives them goosebumps because that's what they want to hear, right? They want to hear about someone who's a student paying attention and who's observant and is picking things up. But if it's just, that one page that, this person walked around in my office for 5 days, it's not very helpful.
Yeah. Here's the tough thing I'm thinking about with regards to what we've been saying about these letters of rec, about, the one faculty member cuts and pastes things from a resume in there, and the physician just says, yeah, they were with me and they seemed like a nice young man and I think he'll do well in medicine, is that the applicant signs the confidentiality waiver. So
right.
They don't get to see what the letter writer is saying. So, right. On one hand, the listeners are hearing from us what we see, but but as an applicant, you can't control this. Like, you can't control everything as far as the letter writers go, how they're going to compose that letter. So I guess if you want to get a letter from a physician and it ends up being like, well, they dressed nicely and they spoke clearly and they seem to be a good citizen, then it's not going to hurt you. It's not your fault because you signed a confidentiality waiver that you were not going to see what they say about you. And right. so don't skip the confidentiality waiver. It'd be one piece of advice for
absolutely
me.
Not.
Like, don't,
absolutely.
Yeah, don't skip that. But I know it's tough though for applicants to kind of hear this. We're talking about letters that kind of are like, oh, okay, it's fine, but
right. Well, I think part of it has to do with how they engaged with the faculty member, right? So if you approach a faculty in 180 or even a 60-person class and ask them for a letter and they say, sometimes they will write, that I haven't interacted much. Person was in class, they got an A. I met them once, I interviewed them. I interview everyone that I write letters for. So I don't encourage students to request letters from that faculty member because the student has not invested time. Right? So you can prevent, prevent is maybe a strong word, but I don't know what other word to use right now, but you can, prevent those types of letters being written about you if you invest the time in the faculty and go to the office hours more than once, right? So having taught before, this was it. I sit in my office, sit, no one shows up, and then all of a sudden people want letters from me. I don't know you. I just refuse to write the letters. And I know it's hurtful for students, and I told them this. This is why. Because I can't write a letter that's a strong letter for you. But on the other hand, this other person who's been here, 12 times, 8 times was to negotiate his grade, but we still, I know this person. I can write a letter for him. And so I agree with you that the confidentiality is an issue here because the student can't see what's in the letter, but they are very aware of what type of interaction they had.
Right. Good point.
And, and so I think they can be a bit more selective in approaching faculty members. So it takes time. So I loved when you said, if you're a freshman listening to this podcast, look at all of your faculty very closely. Find the person that you think you want to get to know. Go to their office hours. That's why those hours are there, right? They have to have them. You have them published. Nobody shows up. Show up.
Yeah. Ask
questions. Take things to them that you're seeing outside of class that relate to what you're doing.
Yeah. That goes to, you're right on a question that we got from Colin at University of Michigan. He said, okay, so how do I ask for a letter of recommendation from my professor? So you've been in this situation. What do you like to see or hear from somebody when they come through the door and they're like, can I sit down and ask you a question? What's your ideal request look like?
I mean, if it's a student that I've known that has come to my office multiple times, I'll probably know that the plan is to apply to med school, right? Because that's not the first thing that you say when you go to a faculty member first office visit. But if it's the first time that you're going and what you want to ask is to ask for the letter, then you just sit down and let them know, Professor so-and-so, I'm in this class. I'm here to, request that you write a letter for me. Are you able to provide a strong letter of recommendation for me? Or a strongly positive letter of recommendation for me. And in order to be able to ask, there needs to be a reason for this person to be able to provide the strong letter. And if you're sitting with an A in the top 1% of the class, you're in a better place to do that, right? And sometimes the best that you get is, she was in my class and she was at the top of my class. And that's not a hurtful letter, just as you pointed out earlier. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't help you either. It checks off the box, right? I have a box. They have to give me 3 faculty letters. You have to have the 3 letters for the application to be complete. And when I review them, I write, the letters of recommendation are positive. None indicate that the student had a strong relationship with the faculty members. Is that hurtful? Not really. They're just not giving me additional information. What I tell students is I want to like you more than I even did before once I'm done reading these letters.
Yep. Good point. How about a letter? Okay. Nicole from WashU, she says, if I've been working in a lab for the last 2.5 years, should I try to get a letter from my super busy PI, or will a letter from a postdoc, which I work with more closely, be okay if it's co-signed by the PI? So very specific here.
Yeah. So, and I love that question. And the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Because if if it's a big lab and PI's, rarely there and is just providing, creative genius for the direction of the lab, they really won't know the student that well. And absolutely. So the postdoc, the fellow, even the graduate student, that's all fine. Sometimes there are big labs like that where they have weekly presentations and the undergraduates are presenting in that lab. So sometimes a faculty member will say, I haven't worked with them directly, but they're a member in my lab and they do presentations on a weekly basis. And when they do the presentations, they're really great. Whatever they can get is fine. I think they would just qualify it, right? That we're in this big lab and I work more closely, with this postdoc.
Okay.
That's fine for us.
Last one. I totally agree 100%. Last one comes from Lindsay at Notre Dame. And she says, my school offers a committee letter. Do I have to get a letter from them, or can I just get my own letters on my own?
She can get letters on her own. We don't even ask if your school has a committee and you're not submitting a committee letter, why aren't you submitting the letter?
Okay.
I don't ask that. I have asked that question in the past, and there's a variety of reasons why students don't get the committee letter. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes they don't meet the qualifications, different things like that. So we don't judge them based on that. They can submit individual letters, which is fine.
I will say, from my perspective, sometimes your ears you kind of like wonder, like, well, Notre Dame writes spectacular committee letters.
Oh my goodness.
Why,
yes.
why is Lindsay not getting a letter from the committee? And
right.
So, but like you said, sometimes it's timing. If they maybe were their office semester, it's something like that can come up. But it does, when we know, I think most admissions offices know the schools that have committee letters and the ones that are really good. You kind of wonder, like, why is she not getting a committee letter? Is she avoiding something, or was it another issue?
Right, but I do want I forgot her name. Was it
Lindsay.
Maddie?
Yeah, Lindsay.
I want Lindsay to know. Yeah, I want Lindsay to know that doesn't prevent me from picking up the phone and calling the advisor at Notre Dame that, I know personally as well as you do, and saying, hey, we've got this applicant from your school. She doesn't have a letter from you. Do you have any insight?
Yeah.
And we've done that before for a student who, documents 1,200 hours of research in somebody's lab, and we don't have a letter from the PI. We'll pick up the phone and call the, investigator. It's just, this person has thousands of hours in your lab. Why is it that you didn't write a letter? And sometimes the comments are very helpful. Generally, it's, I wasn't willing to write one because I was too busy. I was, out in Thailand doing some work or something. But sometimes it's, they were there for 2,000 hours and I couldn't wait until, they left.
Yeah.
That's helpful to know.
Yeah.
So that's where we sit
I'm
on
nodding
it.
my head emphatically. We do the same thing. We're not afraid to pick up the phone and call people and just go, hey, can you give us some insight? And you know what? Usually, I think like 90% of the time, there's some rational reason as to why they didn't get a letter, and go, okay, well, thanks for good to talk to you, and thanks for the insight. So, well, that I loved. Thanks for answering these questions, Layla. You
of course,
and I agree with you going through these on everything that we talked about here. Your insight is, again, you're a pro at this. It's very obvious. Just to kind of wrap things up, I want to wind it down. Any last minute recommendations kind of a grand finale to listeners, like Dr. Amiri's recommendations, like books, podcasts, things that you like that you recommend to people, movies, blogs. Do you have any final recommendations?
Oh my goodness.
Medically related or non-medically related? Fun
so
stuff.
Medically related, I was made aware of this book at my job when I was working at a different medical school. And I love this book because it talks a little bit about the history of medicine and why medicine needs to be grounded in science. So Charlatan is an awesome book. Mm-hmm. So it's a quick read. It's easy.
Okay.
And it's in the medical arena. So I'm not very much a blog person. I should be, and I was for a while. So I haven't been. Okay. I've been reading applications and interviewing students. So I'm sorry,
I'm starting to get my life back right now. We've finished up screening, I think, recently, and I feel like, okay, I can start to get back into reading things that that aren't applications and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah, but I'm reading the Double Helix, and I'm reading the Art Forger. So two pretty not related books, but I've been enjoying both of those.
Oh, that's great. I'll put links to the Art Forger.
Okay.
And
Art Forger. Yeah, that's a fiction. Yeah, it's just a fictional novel. Okay.
All right. This has been fantastic. This time has flown by for me. This has been awesome. So thanks for doing this with me again. I really can't thank you enough.
Thank you. It's always so much fun to chat with you. I really appreciate it.
Well, listen, I'm going to wrap things up. I'm probably going to bump in with you in upcoming, probably in Chicago, the next AMC thing, and have our affair there too. Yeah. So I look forward to thanking you in person and catching up then. So thanks very much for spending some time with me today, Layla. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you later.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.